Welcome into Heating Up. I believe this is episode 8. We're recording this on January the 3rd, 2022. A few games have happened. It was over the holidays, so we took a little time off during the holidays and wanted to come up with something a little bit different instead of just going game by game. And we can talk a little bit about the game because I actually got to watch the Auburn LSU game with Cody and Ed, so that'll be fun to talk about if you guys want to. But the pitch for the days was the top 5 players between both teams, Auburn and Alabama, so far this season. So I didn't really give you all a criteria of how you wanted to do it. So that's going to be kind of my first question is somebody jump in and kind of tell me what was your thought process? Is this just gut feeling based on watching them play? Were you looking at box scores and going back? Were you counting some games specifically more important than other games? Somebody tell me how you decided to make your list.
I went easy and went straight to the statistics. And looked at everybody, not just points, right? Looked at all the boxes and really see like the impactful ones. That points is the easiest one to go off of, but also use some of it. Everybody on this pod has watched a lot of Alabama and a lot of Auburn basketball too. So a little gut feeling, maybe a little 60-40 statistics, 40 of what I've seen and who's impacting the game the most.
That's kind of what I did too, but I tried to take some of the outlier games out as far as, blowing somebody out or, some kind of opponent like that. So I tried to look at, I think I had about 7 games for each team, basically. Maybe a couple more. Alabama's played a lot of really close games, it seems like. So a couple more, and I kind of ranked them each time by who had the most impactful game. And I tried to think stats, kind of looking at everything. Also keeping an eye on percentages a little bit, just because you shot the ball a lot, For example, I'm a little higher on Keon Ellis than some of y'all just because I thought percentage-wise he was more important in some games, but we'll get into that in a minute. And I kind of ranked them like 1 through 3 or 1 through 4, and then the more games that they were the best player, I gave them that kind of benefit of the doubt. So, I gave a little bit more weight to somebody being the best player in a game, even if the next game maybe he's the 3rd best player instead of the 2nd best. That's just kind of how I went about it. And just to get everybody in the points wise, I did. If I gave somebody first place, that's 5 points. All the way down to 5th place was 1. And then all of y'all sent them to me and I added them up and we've got an overall list. So Drew or Cody, did y'all have any other way that you kind of went about it?
I mean, obviously stats are the easiest thing to judge a player by, especially when you break them down and kind of tell more about how they did each game. But for me, I put a big emphasis on what this player means to this team as well. Like what kind of impact is he having, regardless if it leads to a stat or not. And I think that's why my list was a little bit different than probably some of y'all's. But yeah, if I had a guy creating a lot of offense, even though he may not end up with the assist, then that ranks high on my list, even if he's only averaging 4 assists a game. So I kind of went a little kind of the same because you have to include stats in there. But I also went by the eye test and what that player brought to that team as well.
Yeah, and mine, to kind of piggyback off Drew, mine was a little less stat oriented and kind of what that individual player means to their team. Like if they was got hurt, how replaceable or irreplaceable are they? And also, I actually took into consideration on draft stock. A couple of guys that it's arguable if I should have left off, but it's like that guy might be going in the first round of the NBA draft. I feel like I need to have him on my list.
Well, then let's kind of jump into it. So we had a tie. Basically, there's kind of tiers to this. There's a first tier that, and I'll just throw it out there. I mean, Jabari Smith got most of the votes at number 1. And we can go ahead and make this the very first talking point. Is all 4 of us had Jabari as the number 1 player, and Riley, who's not with us tonight, did not. Had him number 2. He was the only one that didn't have him there. He had Shackleford number 1. So we can save that a little bit for Riley to kind of speak on next time. But did y'all have any thoughts on anybody else? Was it close for you guys?
No, at the end of the day, I think it's, he's a clear cut, if not the best player, the best prospect in all of the league. So, I mean, it was. And while watching him, he's shows on the court as well. So, yeah, that was a pretty easy vote on my behalf. But yeah, he's been playing really well this year.
Yeah, same here. I think it was a clear cut one. I'm not going to go too much into it. But could you argue that if Auburn lost Jabari, they would be in a better position than if Alabama lost Shaq? maybe that was Riley's thinking.
I
I would
don't
agree.
know.
I like to think, don't get me wrong, Jabari's unbelievable. But I like to think that if we lost Jabari and Alabama lost Shaq, Alabama would still be in a pretty good position just because you have JD who now star versus come off the bench versus, with Jabari, you don't have. Well, I don't know. That's kind of my thought. That's tough.
I mean, and if the question is the best performance of the year, I don't think that's really close. But whatever. I guess we can save that for that. But so I want to get that storyline out there first. Is Jabari was definitely points wise was number one on the list. But overall, 8 players. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 8 players received some kind of vote in this. So the 2 players that were kind of the outliers that received some votes, but were a good bit down, did not make the top 5 or actually top 6 because we had a tie, were J.D. Davison and Wendell Green. And now a couple of us had Wendell on the list. Did anybody here have Wendell in their top 5?
I did.
I had Wendell in top 5 too.
So kind of tell me what was your thinking on Wendell Green being in the top 5?
Well, I mean, after watching y'all play LSU, I probably would have put Kessler at that number 5 position instead. But I mean, it's kind of a toss up. When I was figuring my 5 out between Wendell Green, Kessler, and even KD Johnson at spurts, that 5 position, it could have went either way, to be honest with you. And I guess I kind of went more offensive perspective on what Wendell's been doing for y'all coming off the bench and giving you that energy and, kind of giving you a little Jared Harper spot. He comes in, hits long threes, creates offense for you guys. And it's kind of been y'all's turning point when he came from the bench. Whereas Kessler here lately has been on a tear, blocking shots and rebounds and stuff like that. But at the time, Wendell had my vote, and that's pretty much why.
So, yeah, I had Wendell at number 5. Just to kind of, I know this is just a quick look at a stat, but he's averaging 4.6 assists for our team. And the next closest person is Zepp at 3. I mean, the amount of playmaking he does for us and the way he's able to close out games, I mean, he's kind of solidified himself as the go-to guy. And when we're playing St. Louis, I mean, it was him and Kessler were just dominating the pick and roll. And I feel like Auburn would have a really hard time replacing his ability to run the offense. And Zepp and KD are good in their own rights. Zepp more of a defensive guard, and KD being a guy that can get hot at any moment or turn nothing into a play. But Wendell's kind of the calming force. And, I think we really rely on him to run our offense, especially down the stretch of tough games.
Yeah, I think it's funny that, I guess I'm going to give the anti-Wendell Green part. He's one of my favorite players in the whole thing. But when I started looking game by game, yeah, there were a couple games where he was right there at the top. But there are also some games where he didn't have as big of an impact. If you start looking down, there were a few games. I mean, I know this being ticky-tack, but like the Syracuse game, I felt like he was the 4th or 5th best player out there. If you looked at there was a UCF game where he really didn't make it. He had some games where he just didn't shoot the ball very well. And when he wasn't shooting the ball very well, all of a sudden he wasn't getting enough playing time because Zepp was out there and that kind of thing. So that's why I didn't have Wendell, but I do think he's key to success. And the other player who got some votes but won't be considered in the top group was J.D. Davison. Cody is the only person that put J.D. Davison on his list, and he put him as high as number 3. So definitely a big outlier there compared to everybody else. Kind of give me your reasoning. I know you hit it on it a little bit earlier, but why'd you have J.D. Davison as the 3rd best player between these 2 teams so far this year?
Well, we did these lists a while back. I think I'd probably move Kessler up in those rankings and JD down first and foremost. But just I guess I'll go ahead
and say these lists did not consider the first SEC game. This was every non-conference game did not consider the LSU game for Auburn or the Tennessee game for Alabama.
Just looking at his upside, when he comes into the game, he gives, to me, in my opinion, he gives Bama they're more dynamic on offense when he's in the game. Well, let me take that back. He coming in with a bench unit gives them a reliable offensive weapon. And in the way he runs transition up and down the court, there's not a lot of second units that can keep up with him, not a lot of first units to keep up with him. And just, I mean, his upside, I know he's had some growing pains and he's not been consistent. And he kind of, he's the last few games, he's been going up and down a lot, but I think they're really going to rely on him going forward just because of his athleticism. I mean, there's not a lot of people out there with that kind of athleticism, and they could set him over the top. And another, like I said earlier, you know, just kind of projecting forward, you know, scouts are obviously, and everybody sees something in this kid. He's a next level athleticism. So I had a hard time not putting him in the top 5.
Drew, can we jump to you for a minute just to talk a little bit about the Tennessee game? Also, I know JD got a little criticism for his play in that game. What'd you see out of him in that game? What do you think was going on there?
It's kind of what Cody said, the consistencies, you know, a young guard that plays really fast. A lot of times you have those turnovers, and he was plagued by them in that first half. You know, he couldn't put the ball in play without throwing it to somebody or getting it tapped away. But the cool thing you saw about him was, you know, the overcoming adversity, and he ended up playing a good game after, you know, he kind of slowed down and took more care of the ball. And like Cody said, you know, I wasn't far from putting him on my list. It's just, you know, with the inconsistencies and everything he's brought to it right now, I didn't think he was above the other 5 that I had. However, if we were going off, you know, purely potential or draft stock or something like that, then yeah, he's like Cody said, he's up there, and he's got just as much potential as most of the guards in the league. But it's just about when he gets to that point. I think he will eventually. At this point in the season, just so far in the non-conference, it's been hit or miss.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm right there with you guys on that. So let's get to the rankings then. So this will be a top 6 technically, because 2 guys are going to be tied for the kind of the 5th place or the 4th place, and those 2 guys are KD Johnson and Keon Ellis. So let me start with you, Ed, because you and I are the only ones that had KD, but we had him high enough that he got enough points to be on the list. Kind of tell me your thought process behind KD, and I'll give you some of mine.
Yeah, I said early on, I went statistics of 60-40. So when you look at statistics, KD is like our second best player on Auburn's basketball team. But then when you also look at it on the other aspect is watching the game, you know, we talked about, I didn't have Wendell on my list. And the reason I put KD over Wendell is because the impact that KD does defensively. You know, Wendell gets picked on defensively and he's probably going to see out the rest of the SEC. But KD, as small as he is, he just flusters any other guard. You know, gets turnovers, leads Auburn in steals, and just the pressure he puts on the ball, the energy he brings. I mean, we were all there, and we've seen it throughout the season. He gets the crowd into it, gets the team into it. So you know, that was kind of solidified from just not what he brings offensively, but what he brings defensively is kind of why I had him on our.
That's a good point. He's a stat sheet stuffer for sure. So if you're really looking at box scores of all these games, he's up there. So that was some for me, but also just big moments for me, you know, whether it be the UConn game or the USF game or really coming back in that St. Louis game. This dude's defense, he's out there a one-man press sometimes and just making it happen. A couple game winners that he just barreled in there and made the play and made it happen. And I just thought for everything he's done, and maybe at the end of the year it catches up and he's not in this top 5, but I thought at the moment for the first half of the year, it was a no-brainer. I think I had him 3rd. Like I really thought KD was up there. Cody, give me some thoughts on why I know KD, and is there any change after seeing him in person at all in Auburn this past weekend?
Well, no, not after this weekend, but I really struggle with this because, like you guys said, as far as the moments that this guy's had already this season, it's kind of a sin not to have him in my top 5. But that being said, like I said, I put a lot of weight into who's replaceable, and you know, I like having KD down the stretch, but like Ed said, his defense is so good compared to Wendell. Wendell gets picked on a lot, but we play so well on a team defense, and you have Kessler and Jabari, you have all these big guys and wings that can help on the defense, and KD is not. It's not really necessary that our guards are just crazy on ball defenders. And that was kind of where I drew the gap, is where we really rely on Wendell's playmaking, and KD doesn't really add too much playmaking for other guys. Now he himself playmakes, he hits a lot of shots, but I think that the gap between Wendell's playmaking ability and KD's playmaking ability is more significant than what KD brings on defense. That was kind of my rationale. I hate it though, because I love KD and I love everything he does.
He's Auburn's one crazy guy. You get to have one of them. KD is that one. So KD was tied with Keon Ellis. I thought that was kind of interesting. Let's see how many people. 3 people had Keon Ellis in their top 5. I think I had him as high as anybody at 4, possibly. When you start looking at the list, especially early in the season, I was not trying to give more benefit to the later games. I tried to make it all even. Early in the season, you could make a case that Keon Ellis is the best player against South Dakota State, against South Alabama, a little bit later against Miami, against Memphis in a loss. If you start looking at box scores, you could make the case, and I did, that Keon Ellis was the best player, and that didn't even really count some of the defensive stuff. So to me, Keon Ellis deserved to be in the top 5 of this group. Who else had Keon on their list?
I did. I think I had him at 4 as well. And you kind of hit on it early in the season. We talked about this guy being the most valuable piece to this Bama team, just because of his two-way of play. He was knocking down shots early in the season, guarding the best offensive player on the other team. And we thought the ceiling was really high, and he's kind of shown that still, but he's had ups and downs here lately with scoring and stuff like that, which isn't a big deal. That's why you got 10 other people on the team. If somebody picks up when you aren't scoring.
Too bad Alabama only has 7, right? Alabama's only got like 7 others, right?
Maybe in the rotation, but yeah, just what he brings both sides of the ball is a big factor. And when he's playing really well, this Bama team is to that next level as far as what they can do, because they can shut down your best scorer while also getting offensive production, and as well with the other 3 guards we have that play majority of our minutes. So
I liked him in that loss to Memphis too. It just seemed like he was really playing hard. Like he wasn't bothered. There's some guys, I'm not saying laid down, but they were like, whoa, what's going on in this game? And kind of get taken out of your game. And he did, and he kept battling. I really appreciate that. Ed, what's the reason that you didn't have Keon Ellis on your list?
I thought just from overall, like the inconsistency, like to your point, it was, wow, Keon Ellis was getting even some first round, some NBA hype early on in the season. And kind of, last few mock drafts I've looked at, that he's kind of been late second or not even on there. And then I think it's just an inconsistency play. But I like to think Keon Ellis is still the X factor. I think I'm kind of leaning towards Shaq being probably the X factor for this team. That, when he's on, Bama's tough to beat. But that was just kind of the inconsistency play for me is what overall not let me to put Keon in my top 5.
Cody, let me ask you this. So Keon Ellis, let's say that he's on more of an Auburn team and he can play the 2 and be surrounded by other defenders and bigger athletic guys. And he doesn't have to take as big of a defensive toll as he does on this Alabama team, kind of carrying the load there. You think there'd be any difference in how you felt about Keon Ellis? But at the same time, there might be a little bit more pressure on him offensively if he doesn't have like JQ and Shaq trying to get buckets and JD and all that stuff. I'm just wondering if he had less of a burden defensively, if he's even a better player, or if that lets him shine having that kind of burden defensively.
Well, yeah, I think that's when I think of Keon Ellis, I think of his defensive ability first. And he's shooting right now, I think 35% from 3. That's kind of cooled off from what he was shooting 50% from like right there at the beginning. And yeah, I think everybody would have him in our top 5. But I don't know. Let's see if I guess think he's good enough offensively to where if he was on Auburn team that he would shine anymore. I think that you see the best of him on Bama because he is picking up such a defensive load for that team. Now looking at his box plus minus, is 4 points higher than any of the other guards for Bama. So I mean, he is obviously impacting the game, beyond the statistics. And anybody that knows basketball can watch a game and realize that. But just as far as his upside, like y'all mentioned, it's not very consistent, and I just think that there are other more important players on Bama's team, specifically than Keon Ellis.
Well, let me ask Drew
guards.
that then. If we're going to talk about you and Cody both kind of talked about most valuable to their team a little bit. To me, it would be easier to groom JD Davison or to get Shackleford the ball and to replace what Quinterly does than it would be to replace what Keon Ellis does. Who are the guys that are going to step up and guard the best player and take charges and rebound for their size? Like, who is that on Alabama?
I think you can replace Shaq with what you said, not Quinterly. I think Quinterly's too important for when they're running their offense, especially in half court sets.
We'll get to that. So that was kind of a tier right there. They were tied, and Walker Kessler was next, just a tick above that. Really, when Drew flipped his Walker and Wendell a little bit, I think that may have gone up on Walker Kessler. So he comes in at number 4. I guess we could talk about this pre and post LSU game, but somebody give me your Walker Kessler take. I think he was on 4 different lists, but he was always either 4th or 5th. Like, nobody really considered him to be in that next top group. Somebody give me your take on Walker Kessler, why he deserves to be in the top 5, but why he's not really in that top tier of top 3 guys.
I think it's a lot of how it's progressed throughout the season. You know, when he first came here and came out of high school, the big talk was, oh, man, we got this 7-footer that can stretch the floor, score from all 3 levels. It's going to be really good for our team and kind of really hard to guard. But here lately, you know, we've seen him kind of put that 3-point side to the back seat and just take a defensive role of blocking shots, getting rebounds, getting that pick and roll and diving to the hole and making the easy baskets for Auburn. My biggest question was, how is he going to do against, you know, good competition, only getting limited time last year at North Carolina? How well would he adjust to it? And he's, you know, LSU, one of the things they was known for was kind of their length and size, and he played really well against their bigs. And even when he don't block shots, you know, he changes shots. So it's a really good thing to have as a big man that can kind of move better. You know, me and Garda was talking about how Wiley had that rim presence kind of for y'all, maybe not as agile as Kessler and all that. But one thing that teams would do was kind of get Wiley out and then go by him. Whereas Kessler can kind of, with his length and athleticism, he can kind of play that role a little bit better than some of the bigs we've seen. And I think, you know, if we were judging based off these last 5 games, he'd probably be in the mid tier of this list right here as far as what he does and what he means to Auburn. But yeah, I think it was just a little slow to begin with, and then obviously he's turned it on now.
Yeah, piggyback off Drew 100%. Pre LSU, I had him. I think I put him right there at 5, and it was in between like him and Keon and Wendell, and I just slipped him at 5 just because, you know, the potential we saw to the St. Louis game. And I mean, after the LSU game, it's like, wow, you know, Walker Kessler might be our most important player just because what he does defensively and the presence you know, it's nice to have a 7'1" center that's athletic and can, you know, pretty much guard the floor and protect the rim. So, you know, if seeing what we've seen now, I'd probably have him close, you know, maybe around that 3 range, even 4, maybe even 2. You can argue that, but it's exciting to see, you know, him grow and develop, and hopefully it continues because I think it'll be very impactful for Auburn going forward.
I think Jeff Borzello from ESPN just named him like the player of the week in the country, Walker Kessler. So was it that big of a? I mean, he played great against LSU, but to me, he just built on what he had been doing. Like I thought Walker Kessler had been right up there the whole time. You know, maybe he scored a little bit more, but I mean, that dude's been blocking shots every night. Like he's been affecting shots every single night. Cody, was there something in the LSU game that you saw that now you'd have him on the list that you didn't before?
Well,
you might have had him at 5.
I had him at 4.
Okay, well then you had the highest one actually, because like 3 of us had him at 5. You had him the highest of all at 4.
Well, and I'm mad at myself because I feel like I should have had him higher even going into the LSU game. Like you said, Alex, he's getting a lot more comfortable within our offense. You can tell it looks so much more natural for him scoring the ball. And another thing, after St. Louis, I've noticed last 2 games, he's really done well at because we got abused on the weak side rebounds against St. Louis, and he's really stepped up rebounding the last 2 games, along with obviously the blocks and the focal point of our defense. And like looking at my list, I definitely could see him above the two Bama guards that I have right now, just because of how he's projecting and how he's been playing here recently.
Yeah, I'm all in. I think he could just go up. Like, I really do. So let's go ahead and move on to the next group, because these Jabari was pretty far ahead, number one. So the two Alabama guards were neck and neck for number 2 or number 3. If you go by points, 14 points, Javon Quinterly was third, 16 points, Jaden Shackleford was second. So let's start with Quinterly, and we have to start with, let's see, that would be me. I'm the only person that did not have Javon Quinterly in my top 5.
Good gosh, Al.
I know. Okay, so looking at the games, there's a lot of times where you can consider JQ the second best player out there. I don't know that you could pick one single game and say he was the best player on the court for Alabama. Drew, what game am I missing that he was the best player on the court?
I mean, from my perspective, I think he is by far the biggest key factor to this Bama team.
But I just think it's because of his usage rate. Like, are we sure that he is that much better that if somebody else was doing his role, they couldn't do some of that too?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one on Bama's team right now that can create offense, and whether it's through pick and roll or driving and kicking or driving and hitting runners and just creating offense for this Bama team like he does. Shaq, he's a great scorer, but he does not provide offense for this Bama team. If he's participating, if he's producing, then it's through points. If JD has the most potential to fill that role, but obviously, like in the Tennessee game, he's just not there yet. There's been a lot of games, specifically the last Tennessee game. If JQ is not on that court, we don't even get close to playing with that team. Tennessee beats us down 2 men in our own arena. And it's been kind of that way throughout the whole year. He's had a few slow games. I think you saw in the Memphis game, as he got tired, he made some careless mistakes and turnovers, but that's just the point of having as much usage, like you said, as he has. Is the more usage you have, the more tired you get, the more bigger chance of having turnovers and stuff like that. But I think he is the most Jabari is by far the best player on this list. However, I would argue that JQ is the most valuable to his team for either team, as far as what he does for that team and how that translates to their win columns and lose columns. He may not have the best stats. I mean, he's averaging almost 15 points a game.
Yeah, but a decently low percentage, and he's shooting threes at 27%. He's averaging
34% right now.
Okay, I had him at 27 on here. Must not have counted the Alabama, or did he shoot it well during the Tennessee game?
He's off and on, but that's one thing. He's 40-something% last year shooting threes, so it's there. I don't know why it hasn't started clicking for him. Maybe his bigger role, he's not that 6 man like he was last year.
Let me throw this stat out here. So right now, Quinterly is this is per 100. He has a turnover percentage of 16.2, where JD has one at 31%. I mean, that's a pretty big difference. I think, like you were saying now, I think you could ask JD to do a lot of the same things as far as driving and finish to the rim and, getting past that first defender and making the right pass. But JD's also a freshman, and he's turning the ball over at a lot higher clip, where Quinterly's a lot more solid.
I mean, it's Quinterly what takes this team to the next level. Maybe not. I think he's the one consistent part about it. The Shacklefords and the Keons and JD, when he starts producing, those are the dudes that take it to the next level, makes this team a really good team. But as far as, kind of the key piece that holds it down, JQ just provides so much creativity on offense. And, when he's not in there, you see a lot of standing around, which leads to bad shots. And that's why we don't score 70 points a game. But for me, he was my highest rated Bama player, and that was pretty much why.
I understand that. And I would have thought the same thing. I think when I started really digging into the stats is where I didn't find that he jumps out that much. And, maybe the free throw miss was huge, and he's had a couple games where he could have hit that big shot that I don't feel like he has. And I don't feel like he's enough of I don't feel like he's enough of a plus defender to really make him just a no-brainer to be on the top 5 list. I mean, I had him at 6th. I just think to this point, Keon Ellis has had a better season than Javon Quinterly. I just really do. I'm not projecting going forward. I'm not saying that. If you play tomorrow night, I probably still am more worried about Quinterly than I am Keon Ellis. But I think just results so far this season, there's more times you could say, man, Keon won this game for us, or he kept us in this game or whatever, than Quinterly. And I think Shaq has had a lot more games if you start looking at the list where he's made the big shot or he's made the big play when something had to happen.
I think to that, though, I think a lot of teams, from just what I've seen, are to Drew's point and to what you're saying now, teams know that JQ runs this offense and runs this team in the half court. So they're forcing him to either take a really tough shot or make somebody else make the play. And that's why kind of that next person is Shaq, right? And if Shaq's not much of a playmaker, he is, don't get me wrong, but he isn't. He's more looking to score, right? He's gonna get you a bucket.
But he also rebounds at a higher level, has more steals, I think, probably than Quinterly. But it's close if it's not. I just feel like he stacks the box score a lot more than Quinterly does.
Yeah, that's kind of where what I mentioned earlier, where when I made this list, mine was half and half on, I took stats in consideration, but how valuable this guy is to this team kind of had a bigger factor for me as far as watching these games and what teams try to do against you and how you respond with your players and stuff like that.
I mean, I definitely see. I mean, everything flows better when he's out there and he's making the important decision. I get all that, but if Alabama's 13-0, then I probably do have him on there, but it hasn't been perfect. So that's where I think your senior point guard, however old he is, I'm not saying it's all his fault, but he could have made a couple more plays and won a game or so.
Alex, I think you made.
But you could say the same where if Shaq would have made 4 more threes or something like that, then that would have opened up that game and it wouldn't even been that close. Because they're here lately, I don't know if you looked at Shaq's games, but he hasn't been shooting the ball very well, and that's kind of why our games have gotten closer. And you don't see us run away with them because we don't have Shaq, on as much as we did earlier in the season.
So you brought up a good point, Alex. So you said that Shaq is a better on-ball defender than Quinterly is?
He's bigger.
I think so. There's a better chance that he's guarding the other guy trying to score, than Quinterly is.
Well, okay. I really kind of have them neck and neck. I see them doing a lot of the same things. To me, they play pretty good defense within the team concept, but I don't see them, either one of them, being really elite on-ball defenders or good play at center field.
I probably bloated the rebounding stat a little bit because Shackleford has been putting up some numbers rebounding the basketball. Maybe that was when I'm just looking at stats, that's jumping out to me when he's putting up 10 in a couple games,
Yeah.
And I don't see any games where Quinterly's had like 12 assists or something to counteract that. But that's just my thoughts. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at the list of the games I went through for Alabama. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that Shaq was the best player, the most important player. Iona, Drake, Gonzaga, Houston, Davison. Houston, if he doesn't make those 2 shots, I mean, look at who they went to. They drew up 2 plays in a row to have Quinterly obviously be like a decoy pretty much coming off a ball screen on the side to get Shaq the ball for the shots at the top.
Well, let's use an exaggerated case. So think of the Phoenix Suns. Who's their most important player? It's probably Chris Paul.
Devin Booker.
Well, I would say Chris Paul. I would say Chris Paul, but the guy with the better stats and I guess higher scoring potential is Devin Booker, obviously. But
I think there are more guys that can get you an offense. I'm not saying they can do what Chris Paul does or do what Quinterly does, but I feel like that's an easier skill set than to be Shackleford or Devin Booker.
I don't know. I think
I feel like you see a lot more lapses in your Shacklefords and stuff like that than you see in those point guards that show up every night and get you in your stuff, create offense, and a lot of that. So, but yeah, I mean, you as far as valuable, both of them are really valuable. We won't be a great team if Shackleford doesn't play well, but we won't get to anywhere we want to go if JQ. I mean, if JD starts progressing and creating offense like JQ's kind of been doing it, then yeah, his value may drop a little. But right now, JQ is the most valuable team player on this team.
Well, let me ask you though: is that just a roster issue though? Why is there not? I mean, maybe you're just expecting Davison to be that guy, but why is there not another veteran of some sort guard that can run the offense? Like, I think that
Herb
maybe is a
Jones?
problem. I mean, he definitely did it last year a lot, right?
And that's their big. I mean, that's where their biggest issue is they don't have her replacement. That's what makes Quinterly, in my opinion, so much more important.
Not many
really
teams have a Herb replacement though.
Oh yeah, well he's really the only competent, replacement for the playmaking and running the offense.
I agree, but I think that's more of an Alabama issue than Quinterly is that good. I mean, I think he's good. I really do, but I think that's more of a roster issue than him being so much ahead.
I mean, I'm not saying there's guys that can create some offense, but I'm just saying no one does it at the level and efficiency that he does, regardless of stats or anything like that.
No, I agree. So let's jump right into number 2 then. Jaden Shackleford was number 2 at 16 possible points. I think I had him second. Most all of us had him second. Riley had him first. Cody did not have him on his list. So we'll throw it to Cody first. If I had to make the case for not having Quinterly, even though I like to watch him play probably more than any of the Alabama guys. Cody, give me your reasoning. Why was Jaden Shackleford not one of the best 5 players in the state this year?
Well, so I kind of have a bias against him, I'll admit, because I was really hoping to see, especially coming into this year, him being more of a playmaker, taking a lot of the playmaking load off Quinterly, and I have yet to see that. I mean, he's scoring well, and he's obviously rebounding well, but like we just said, I don't think that's really where Bama needs that. I mean, they have other scoring options and they have other rebounding options. They need some playmaking and somebody that's able to get others involved. And I have yet to see that from Shaq. I even think JD, when he comes off the bench, he does. I mean, especially in transition, he gets other players involved. He's really good at passing that in transition. But Shaq is, I don't know. He's had some really big moments too, especially like against Gonzaga. It's kind of like the KD thing. I just feel like it's more of a redundant skill set than on that team than other things.
Somebody tell Cody why he's wrong. He's definitely, if not the best player in the top 3 on these 2 teams.
He's definitely. So I had Shaq number 2, and again, I went statistically, but teams are gonna try to take Shaq away, because if you take Shaq away from Alabama and just force JQ to try to score, he's not gonna be able to make the playmaking. They don't have the shooting. They don't have a John Petty or an Alex Reese sitting there spotting up. So you're really relying a lot on Shaq to do that. You look at Gonzaga, he had 28, and he was just 6 for 8 from 3. You look at Houston, he had 18 and 5 from 7 from 3. So what teams are doing, they're isolating, running Shaq off the line, or when JQ comes off the screen, that man's not helping off Shaq. And then come to see that they did a lot. Tennessee did that a lot. Tennessee was long. So that's what, that they were able to have some success. So again, I'm starting to think like Shaq is maybe this X factor, because they're missing some of those shooters that they rely heavily on Shaq's shooting ability. And JQ is going to create for himself and get a bucket, but if he's not efficient, then that's when you're going to start to see Alabama really struggle.
So before we go on the next person, let me just throw this out here. It's kind of, I guess, statistically what I was trying to say. So this is per 100. Quinterly he assists on 24%. JD is at 29%, and then Shaq is at 6.9%. So there's like a huge difference between the
Shaq's out there to get a bucket, man.
He's waiting on the score.
That's what I'm saying. They don't need. They do need. I mean, obviously, everybody needs somebody that can get a bucket, but they need somebody that's able to get some assists and get other players involved a little bit more.
I think y'all are underrating the toughness of being able to get a bucket in college basketball, like KD Johnson and Jaden Shackleford can do. That is hard to do.
If Shaq or KD Johnson are on a fast break and your other teammates start walking back because
get the rebound,
they are not passing the ball.
So let me ask Drew, did you have any consideration of JD Davison being ahead of Jaden Shackleford at this time like Cody had?
No, not JD Davison. Just because of what Shaq, like you said, what he's provided for this team so far this season. As far as if I would take more of a Cody approach and did on, prospect and what he can do in the future and stuff like that, as far as next level kind of stuff, then maybe I would have JD a lot higher. But as far as what Shaq has done offensively for this team, even though he's been struggling these past few games, he's that next level guy for this Bama team. If he is hitting, I'm not saying he needs to have a Gonzaga game every night, but if he is consistently hitting 4 threes a game, then that carries this Bama team a lot further than, these past few games where he's been struggling a little bit to get his shot. And like Agardo said, teams are preparing more for that. They see that, if this guy is that next level for that team, we need to, kind of isolate him and make sure he's not hitting any open threes or anything like that. And you've seen a little bit more struggle from this offense. But and then that's kind of why JQ was a little bit. I had him at 2.
You had
Shaq at 3.
Shackleford. Riley had him first. Ed and I had him second. Drew had him third, and Cody didn't have him on the list.
Yeah. So and that was kind of why that is, because Shackleford is a big key to this Bama team, and we'll live or die by the 3. Obviously, I mean, if you watch Bama play, you know that. And him being on is just brings that team to the next level as far as pace, opens up the whole court for everybody, and it's fun to watch when he's hitting.
I can almost guarantee that in the opposing locker room on the whiteboard when they walk in, his name's at the top of the thing and what do you do against him and what the scout is. And there probably are some ways to neutralize them a little bit, but they're difficult to do. And it's going to open up everything for everybody else if you put that kind of emphasis on guarding him.
Yeah.
So that was the list. And we can talk any more about Jabari if you guys want to. It's going to open that up also to Cody and Ed because y'all got to see Jabari in person for the first time. First of all, he's big. Like, that dude's like 6'10", legit. He is. He's not that much smaller than Kessler. I know Kessler's a giant, but he's a big dude. What are y'all's thoughts on seeing Jabari in person?
The thing we've all been saying is, when you see Jabari, put it on the floor. But why would you do that when you're 6'10" and can just shoot over everybody? No need to be able to put the ball on the floor. But man, he's unbelievable. Just the poise he has and that toughness, that freshman, that he's fired up. Like he has a toughness about him, and he's 6'10", but you can argue he needs to put some muscle. But a lot of times, teams are going to do that in the SEC. They're going to try to bully him and try to get him off his game and try to rough him up a little bit. But he doesn't back down. He didn't back down against LSU, and when Auburn needs a bucket, put him in the high post, put him in the short corner, and kind of space out and let him do his thing. But one thing that's underrated is his playmaking ability. 8 out of 10 times he's going to make the right pass in the right place. So,
talk to me more about poise, Ed. I think that was good that you said that. I haven't heard that described a lot from Jabari. Why do you say poise? I agree with you though.
Yeah, because I think this game, he missed against LSU. He missed his first 2 shots, and then he kind of really didn't get any other looks, so we didn't run anything for him. But he was still out there competing. He was still out there on the defensive end. He was still in the offense, and then towards the end of the ball game, at the end of the first half, like he knocked 7 points, back to right off the bat. So it's just that poise and we've seen that throughout the season. He doesn't let a bad shot or a bad turnover really get him down. He's going to come right back, and short-term memory loss, and he shows so much confidence offensively. And I think that's huge, especially for a guy that's 18 years old. I mean, he's 18 years old and was playing high school basketball last year. Now he's coming to the SEC and being an impact player right off the bat. So I think that's huge for him, and it's for us. We're grateful to have him.
Yeah, just a nitpick. He had a couple two, I think it was 2 bad turnovers in press break. He was just looking down the middle guy and threw it to him. But I mean, LSU's fast, and they're going to be hard pressed to play a better defensive team than LSU. And like you said, I mean, just poised and his ability to just shoot over anybody. And every time I feel like it's going in, it's just unmatched.
I thought Auburn ran a few more things for him. I don't know if y'all noticed, like, that ball screen offense that was working so well for Walker Kessler and then Jabari would be in the corner. They ran some counters to that early against LSU. You could tell they were like, if they've been scouting us, and instead of him running to the corner, he went and sealed middle and did some good stuff. I thought that was a sign of they're going to start running more and more stuff for Jabari Smith throughout the year.
But yeah, they're putting him in that Chumo Kiki position where we made such a run. Give it to him right there off the block a little bit, curl it right coming off a low post screen.
They ran that for a Coro a lot too, getting downhill. And I saw some 5-star recruit. I think he's a 2023 kid that's like a 4. He mentioned, he was like, I wasn't really thinking that much about Auburn, but then I see what they're doing, Jabari Smith, and that makes a lot of sense for me.
And before we get off Jabari, just something else I'm really impressed with. And I had already hit on it. It's just his effort on defense. That says a lot. Like an 18-year-old kid, the speed of the game, you kind of just, and especially somebody as high prospect as him, you probably trying to fill the stat sheet, get your points, whatever. Not him. I mean, he really does. He really does help. And with Kessler, he's the point man of altering shots, but you usually see Jabari right behind him, either cleaning it up or trying to get that rebound. So Jabari's been awesome. Just a delight to have on our team.
Drew, let me ask you one thing on that. Kind of looking forward, let's say that Bediako is not in the game for Alabama. If they're going to come up and set a ball screen for JQ or for any of the guys, is there a chance that they try to get Jabari in that ball screen instead of Walker Kessler?
I don't know. When you look at game film, yeah, both can alternate shots, stuff like that. But more than likely, Jabari will be on somebody that can stretch the floor and shoot the ball a little bit. So that I would probably get Kessler in that pick and roll and get him off of the block or get him out in front of the rim. That way we can hit the roll or we can drive and kick it. Because right now, I mean, it's hard to score on Kessler when he's down there. The only way to do that is to get him out of there. So I still think you'll see Kessler more in those ball screens. But it'll be interesting to see. I imagine, but like I said, I imagine Jabari will be on more of a shooter. So he'll have, what will kind of give him that poise where he can, pick up the roller or he can get out for the 3, but he's got to make a decision.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking you get somebody kind of strong like Shaq, and if they're coming off a ball screen, maybe they'd rather go at Jabari than they would Kessler. I mean, Kessler moves his feet almost as well as Jabari does, to be honest, right now.
Yeah, but if Auburn's small and Jabari's guarding Bediako or somebody like that, then yeah, he would be the guy in there. But if they're both in there, I imagine Kessler will be that one in the ball screen.
So that was our top 5 list. It was really a top 6 because we had Katie Johnson and Keon Ellis tied at the bottom, and then we went Kessler, Quinterly, Shackleford, Smith. Let's look ahead just for a minute. Who's Alabama have coming up next? They play Florida Wednesday. Is that right?
That's right.
So Alabama's got Florida Wednesday. Auburn's got Florida Saturday. I haven't watched a lot of Florida. I know they've got a big guy who's supposed to be pretty good. And then the transfer from Birmingham, the Penn State kid, Myron Jones. Any thoughts, Drew, on Alabama in the next week or so?
Yeah, I like to see kind of that offensive gel come back. We've been missing it here on this last stretch. I don't know if it was Houston kind of exposing a good way to guard us, or we just got in a funk at Memphis, obviously, and it's kind of carried over. And the Tennessee game was the same way. I don't know if you guys got to see the first half of it, but it was ugly if you were a Bama or Tennessee fan. So just kind of getting out of that funk. I mean, obviously it's fine. Beginning of SEC play, you don't want to be at your peak right now, but trying to get back. This is kind of when things kicked into motion for that Bama team last year, as far as going 16-2 in SEC play. So it'll be kind of nice to see them get back in a groove and the offense playing well and the defense adding that tough mentality where it leads to breakouts and stuff like that.
Any thoughts on Tennessee after watching them a little bit more closely in a game against one of your teams? I know they're missing a couple guys, but any thoughts on that team?
Man, that little Ziegler kid, point guard, he wasn't highly touted coming out of high school from New York, I think, but that dude, he's fun to watch. He's tough to guard too. Really quick. He did a really good job in the absence of Kennedy Chandler as far as creating and all of that. But they've got the same team from last year. It seems like they returned pretty much everybody. Added a few new guys, the Justin Powell from Auburn and so some of those guys. But
do you think they're a top tier SEC team, especially when they have everybody going?
When they have everybody going, they're definitely in the top half, if not higher. They're really good as far as, I mean, they got guys that can knock it down, and they got guys that play good defense. They're really actually really good defensively. Their offense is what's been lacking for them, but it's kind of like almost any team you play in the SEC. If you get them on a night where they're playing good, it's going to be really tough to beat. But if you get them on one of their slacking nights or the inconsistencies, then you can put it on them.
Does anybody have the new AP rankings in front of them? They stayed in the top 25, I think, right? See if somebody can pull those up, because I know Auburn was up to 9. It was Alabama 15. Is that what Alabama was?
Yeah, that Auburn 9, Bama 15,
I think
Kentucky
Tennessee.
Kentucky 16, Tennessee 18, LSU 21.
So I think that says a lot that LSU and Tennessee stay in the top 25 after getting beat by Alabama and Auburn. I think that, we're getting a little respect there that's a really tough win.
Yeah.
Who does Alabama have on the weekend?
That is a good question. We play
the Ole Miss.
Missouri, I believe. It's Missouri.
Moving on. That one. Moving on.
At Missouri.
So Auburn's got tomorrow night at South Carolina, which is always difficult for us. I feel like we always struggle there. I think the line's 10.5. I think that's too high. I was looking. South Carolina's not that bad. The teams they've lost to are all really good, and they've gotten a couple big wins. Auburn guys, any thoughts going into South Carolina playing Frank Martin?
Hate going into South Carolina. Yeah. If I was a betting man, I'm not bet that spread.
That place is cursed. Anthony McLemore went down back.
Is that do y'all hate going there or to Ole Miss worse?
South Carolina.
Yeah,
sure.
Really.
There's a lot of Auburn teams that has no business losing in South Carolina.
They're just physical with us a lot, and I feel like a lot of times we haven't done well with that. I think this team may be a little better physically, but I think Bruce was saying that the referees all year have been letting everybody get away with a little bit more contact. So I think he's a little worried about this game. I think the fact that he's worried is he's going to really be laying into him, all week. Go, hey, we can't drop this game. And sometimes South Carolina doesn't have a good crowd. And sometimes that's like old Atlanta Hawks games. It's it's an advantage for the team that's used to that. There's no energy in the building, but I would think with a top 10 team coming in, surely they'll have a good crowd. But I know on StubHub tickets, you get them for like $10 still Tuesday night in Columbia.
Bruce said it today during his interview. He said, we have a good record up there, but we don't play very well up there. And looking at South Carolina, they got a win over a good UAB team who's picked to win the conference.
They beat somebody else. Somebody good.
Florida State and Georgetown. I mean, Georgetown's not doing well down here, but still a big. And Florida State's tough. So they're a sleeper in the ACC. So they're 9-3. The rest of their wins, you can argue a loss against Princeton, a loss against Coastal Carolina. So I lost to Clemson. So 9-3. I mean, it's not going to be easy. I'm with you, Al. I don't like that line there. So we'll see. We just got to make sure we come in and we're tough and we're prepared to take a punch or two.
And then Florida on the weekend. I think it's a night game. I'm gonna try to be there. I think it's gonna be rocking again. I give me whatever bet anytime at home right now. I just think that we could beat anybody in the entire country at home, or we're at least gonna make a run at it.
Agreed.
And y'all go ahead and tell everybody that y'all figured out the best way to watch an Auburn basketball game, I think, for the first time.
Yes, club seats up in the 29th row where it's a little bar stool area. They sell alcohol up there now. I mean, it's by far, you got plenty of elbow room, 2 feet next to the next person closest to you. Best way to watch an Auburn basketball game.
I was up and down pacing and jumping and plenty of room to do all that stuff. And like you say, you got alcohol that you can buy right behind you.
Take off the nerve a little bit.
Yeah, there's not a bad seat in Auburn Arena either. So
I would almost film from. I did sometimes when I was a manager. I'd have to film, and they'd say, "Hey, let's check it out from the upper level," because you can really see the court well from that upper level. It's like you're straight up in the air. You can see why the press is working sometimes. That X and O kind of stuff. But we'll wrap it up there. Just kind of want to do a little ranking episode, see what y'all thought. I know we had some Alabama guys hitting us up on Twitter with thoughts on theirs. I think they're all pretty high on Quinterly, so we'll see about that. They might not like my take. But we'll get back in here next week after a couple more SEC games and kind of recap the games. And we'll definitely bring Riley in to explain to us why he thinks Shackleford is better than Jabari Smith. And Cody can tell him why he's not even in the top 5.
Y'all want to see my revised top 5 after?
No, Cody, you can't come in with a revised top 5.
There's no advising.
I moved all the Bammers down and put Jabari and Kessler at 1 and 2.
We'll do it again the first week of February. How about that? All right, guys. We'll see y'all next week.
All right. See you.